We take you straight to that story. Correctional Services has confirmed that convicted murderer Oscar Pistorius has met with the parents of Riva Steenkamp as part of the victim-offender dialogue. In a statement, the department says the former Paralympian has been transferred back to the Attridgeville Correctional Facility following the completion of the dialogue. Pistorius is currently serving a 12-year sentence for fatally shooting Riva in his Pretoria home on Valentine's Day in 2013. For more on this, I'm joined by Correctional Services spokesperson Singabakho Nxumalo. Very good evening to you. Thank you so much for talking to us on Newzroom Afrika. The dialogue the dialogue occurred between Oscar Pistorius and Riva Steenkamp's parents. Talk to us about what exactly transpired.
A very good evening, and thank you for having us. I think it's important to highlight that it was in November 2021 when we issued a statement on Mr. Pistorius being transferred to Gqeberha for the purposes of a victim-offender dialogue. And from then, we've been receiving quite a number of inquiries as people were anxious, wanting to know whether it has taken place. And we had to explain that there is a lot of work involved there, because it starts with preparing the victims, the inmate, and other parties that may have been affected by the crime. In this instance, may even involve the family members of the perpetrator. So what we're able to confirm today is that inmate Oscar Pistorius has been moved back to his center of origin, which is Attridgeville Correctional Center, to continue with the sentence, meaning that the victim-offender dialogue has been fulfilled. This took place in Gqeberha. I may not disclose the actual dates, but it was not a once-off sitting. There were quite a number of sessions, but the actual dialogue was finalized, where the victims of crime could sit along the table with the perpetrator and go through quite a number of issues. So as a department, that we can confirm that that has been fulfilled. Now, what is to happen is that the inmate has to continue with the sentence until such time that the parole board decides whether Mr. Pistorius will be fit to be placed out on parole or not. But that can only take place once Mr. Pistorius has completed all the programs and has served the minimum required time. But even then, there's no guarantee that will be placed out. The parole board has to make that particular decision.
What purpose does the victim-offender dialogue seek to perform?
When a crime has been committed, it does affect the victims in a very big way, but also the family members, relatives of the actual perpetrator. I may give you a typical example. If I were to commit crime in the community where I live, even if I'm now detained, my family, will be considered as that household where, this bad boy comes from. And people will say all manner of things, they'll be treated differently. So when we talk about restorative justice, which is at the base for the victim-offender dialogue, it's all about to say, how is it possible that we can have safer communities where people can live in harmony? And one of the things is to say, as crime happens, but it's not the end of the road. There is a need to find means for people to reconcile, and this takes place in various forms. So when it comes to a person who's been detained, it is always important that you create a conducive environment for the victims to meet with the perpetrator. In most cases, people will have questions where they want to know, why did you have to do what you did to me or to my family? And they'll be expecting answers, particularly so because when a person is before court, the victim will go there as a witness for the state. In many cases, we then find the victim saying that I still have quite a lot to ask this person? I've got a lot of questions and I'm expecting answers. At least the victim offender dialogue does present that particular platform, but it doesn't end there. It also paves way to say, how can these two structures find means to move towards forgiveness, if that is possible, or even to find, to coexist, in a particular setup. More often, crime happens between people who know each other or who live in the same locality. It is therefore important that we find ways to bring them together. We are not saying that we are forcing them to forgive one another, but with time we do believe that they can see the need to say, we can live together, we can put behind us whatever that may have happened. It doesn't mean that they would have forgotten about it, but it's all about creating safer communities.
Now, we know that last year already, Oscar Pistorius penned a letter to the Steenkamps, and the Steenkamps then spoke of their anguish after reading that letter, which shows that the process to interact with the Steenkamps was already underway. How much influence will the Steenkamps have on the decision to grant Pistorius parole, or perhaps eligibility?
Yes. If I may add one thing more to what I just said earlier, the victim offender dialogue is presided by a specialist because we fully understand that it is very sensitive and it's something that must be handled with special care. Hence, we'll find our psychologists, social workers, criminologists being involved there, even the clergy also forming part of that, because there is quite a lot that must be dealt with, and the people with the right set of skills are then entrusted with that particular process. And coming back then to your question, is that every thing, meaning the entire journey of an inmate, is then taken before the parole board for them to make a decision. When a person is admitted in a correctional facility, we draw what we call a correctional sentence plan. It then details the type of programs that the inmate will have to partake on, and also the assessments that will be done by our specialists, who are then expected to submit reports. When the parole board sits, they go through the entire profile before them. They will even go through the statements by the victim. The victim's case, they prefer to make written submissions, or some they prefer to make oral submissions. Everything is then taken into consideration, then a decision is taken. But what I need to stress and emphasize is that the decision doesn't solely rely on one particular element. It has to take the entire rehabilitation journey of an inmate, because when you place a person out, the important questions there are to say, will this person still be or will pose danger to society? Are there grounds that we can monitor this person? Is this person now different? And will this person make a positive contribution to society the moment is out? So there is quite a lot that the parole board needs to consider and make that decision. And what we also have to emphasize is that parole placement does not mean the end of a sentence, but it's a continuous rehabilitation journey of an inmate. It's now to say, you've served part of your sentence inside a correctional facility. Now you'll be serving the remainder of that sentence out there in the community. Hence, when we place people out, we attach what we call parole conditions, which must guide them to adjust and start realizing the second chance, because we do not want a situation where once people are out, we are unable to trace them, we can't even account for their whereabouts. Hence, it's important that people do abide by those parole conditions. Hence, even when we place a person out, we make it a point that there is a positive structure, meaning that there will be someone who will be willing to welcome them and assist those people to adjust.
So in terms of the steps going forward and the sitting on the decision on whether or not parole will be granted, let's talk about some of the other considerations when it comes to the number of years spent behind bars, and then, what is the basis there before the decision can then be considered? Because we know that last year already the process was set and scheduled according to reports around what Pistorius' lawyer has said.
Okay. For every inmate sentenced to a determined term, meaning given a particular years to serve, that person will have to serve those years, but the Correctional Services Act is clear in saying that a person can only be eligible to be considered for parole placement after serving the minimum term of that. In simple English, that is half of the sentence. But in that, it doesn't say that once you've served that minimum term, therefore you are placed out. You have to be considered whether you are fit to be placed out. Hence, then the issue of the correctional sentence plan will come into place. Those assessment reports by our specialists, will have to be considered. And all these other elements to participate in the victim offender dialogue. What was your behavior inside our correctional facilities? Quite a number of these variables. Then the parole board will have to go through that and make a decision. Hence, we opted for independent parole board so that we are not then blamed to be a referee and a player. For correctional services is to say, this is the person that was brought to us. We admitted this person. We managed to draw a correctional sentence plan, and this is what this person managed to accomplish in the time that he's been with us. And then the parole board will then make a determination whether this person is a candidate to be placed out or not. But it's a very lengthy process. It's not an easy way to say people must just serve minimum sentences and be taken before the parole board. Because when we pick up that some of the programs have not been completed, unfortunately that person cannot be placed out. Even if that person is placed before the parole board, our report will state that this person is yet to complete other programs, therefore that person will not be placed out. So for us, what is critical is to say a person has to be rehabilitated, and the person has to fully understand the impact of the crime that he or she may have committed, and that there are victims out there. And what we expect from that person is to say you cannot go back and still be the same person.
Yeah, absolutely. Oscar Pistorius' lawyer has been reported to say that Pistorius is a model prisoner and he does meet the requirements for parole. You say it's going to be a lengthy period. How much time are you looking at here, considering that the steps so far are heading towards that decision?
It is difficult for one to come up with timelines, but all that is critical is to have that profile prepared the right way, presented by our case management committee before the parole board. And the parole board will, one, have to check whether everything has been done accordingly, and even go to check whether the sentence has been served as required, meaning that the person brought before them, has this person served the minimum required time, and then go through every detail in that particular profile, and then make a decision. Hence, it's then difficult to say here's a time frame that we can expect this person to be before the parole board. And also, what makes it so difficult is that it doesn't mean that when the person goes before the parole board, a decision will be taken in that instance. There may be delays, could be taken there and there, but it's something that is guided by the Correctional Services Act to say how the parole boards must go about parole consideration of inmates. Mm-hmm. But then the process has to be fair to everyone, has to be fair to the inmate consent, and also the victims must find comfort in the manner to say everything was done the way it is prescribed in the Act. And unfortunately, and this happens in most cases, that many people will still have certain reservations. They will tell you that, no, we want this person to die in prison. But we always say South Africa opted for a correctional system. We moved away from the prison system, where we say people must be given a second chance when they deserve a second chance. Rehabilitate them. We do believe that people can be changed, or people can realize that there is something to live out for, something positive, and make that change once they are placed out. So that is our responsibility as correctional services. Hence, we stress that we don't just place people out there. People must earn the right to say, I've served the sentence the way it was expected, and I know that once I'm out there, I will behave and I will be a change agent to my community.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Singabakho Nxumalo, Correctional Services spokesperson, weighing in there on the victim-offender dialogue that took place between Oscar Pistorius and Riva Steenkamp's parents.